Welcome to OLC 40. This is week 7 and we are on class 25. This is unit 4 and I am Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways to reach me. I am in the office from 9 to 12 and then 1 to 4. I am in the studio right now. It can be reached at 1-800-465-7144. The WAS office is 1-800-667-3703. I'm usually here for about an hour or so after the studio work. You can fax your work at 1-800-463-7852. However, the best thing to do is email work to student.work@nnec.on.ca. This ensures that your work is not lost or unretrievable if a new teacher takes over the course. It's kind of an important point. I had a few people looking for stuff and it's like, well, it wasn't sent to me, unfortunately, so I can't find it for you. So really, really important, send it to there. However, if you have a question about the course, send it to me at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. If you want to re-listen to a recording, it is all saved on YouTube at gpercy/wasa. Okay, so we were talking about complex sentences. I'm kind of reviewing really quickly so it makes sense. Otherwise, worried we'll get lost. The previous slides yesterday that we talked about shows how to correctly join two sentences together to create a compound sentence. So remember that the two sentences have to be two complete sentences that could have stood on their own and just ended with a period. In other words, it has to have a subject, a verb, predicate, express a complete thought. So I want to discuss how to create complex sentences because they are a little trickier. Because instead of joining two complete sentences, they're joining one complete sentence with an incomplete sentence. Now, usually it has a subject and predicate, but it doesn't form a complete thought. Normally because it starts with a subordinating conjunction. So in order to avoid confusion, since we're working on creating larger sentences, we generally cause these little sections a clause. So a complete clause could stand on its own or an independent clause, and a dependent clause could not stand on its own. So quick review, it would sound like a dependent clause would sound like, unless he brings the money. If she says yes, before you put in the eggs, once you finish the car, since you're already mad. And you can see it's almost like we've cut somebody off in the middle of talking. It just doesn't quite make sense. They need the other half for the sentence to make sense. And part of that is because all of these, you can see, they start with a subordinating conjunction. And that kind of a conjunction implies there's going to be two thoughts joined together. So here's some examples. Unless he brings the money, I can't buy the groceries. If she says, yes, I am going to marry that girl. Before you put in the eggs, make sure the pan is hot. Once you finish the car, we need to mow the lawn. Since you're already mad, I might as well tell you I am the one who broke the vase. Okay, so here is an example of subordinating conjunctions. This is not all they are because there's a lot of phrases that end up working as a subordinating conjunction, but these are some of the common ones, okay? Than, rather than, as much as, whether, which for some reason is spelled incorrectly, I apologize, whereas, after, as soon as long as, before, by the time, now that, once, since, until, when, whenever, while, who, whoever, whom, whomever, whose, if, only if, unless, provided that, even if, though, although, even though. And I'm gonna well, let me do this. It's driving me crazy seeing weather look like that. Okay, so kind of quickly here, I'm gonna fill that with a gray and we're gonna write the word weather, okay? It's one of those H ones, and just to be fussy, I'm gonna make it green and make it bold. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Let me do that. All right, now that'll more fuss than I want to do. Okay, so here, look for the independent clause. And the biggest hint is to look for, do you see a subordinate conjunction? Now, one or two of these do not quite have a subordinate conjunction, but for the most part, I'm going to take out the first one. It was originally on the information package that I took, but I don't quite think it works very well. Okay. For the last time I am able to, I will take the field. So first of all, where's the subordinate conjunction? It's the word for. If that's the conjunction, then this whole section it's attached to is the dependent clause. Let me see. Yep. Although I left, I did not remember my roots. So again, where's the conjunction? Although. Although is your conjunction. That means this whole section, although I left, is your dependent clause. And you can see I did not remember my roots. That could stand on its own. But although I left, it doesn't. It just can't. I was quite upset since he was not there. So where's the coordinating conjunction this time? It's right here in the middle, which means this section after here is our dependent clause. Where we are, it is the right place to be. This is awkwardly phrased, but this is your dependent clause. I will give my best effort, even though I am tired. So our subordinating conjunction is right there in the middle, even though. And so we keep on going, and that whole section is your dependent clause. Although we won, I was not satisfied with my performance. Although we won, there's our dependent clause. I saw a meteor overhead while I was waiting. So where's our clause? It's not at the beginning because we've got the word I. So right here in the middle, while, that's our conjunction. And we join it up with the rest of the clause while I was waiting. Before I watched the movie, I went to the snack bar. So where's our conjunction there? Right here at the beginning, right? Before I watched the movie. Now, why is any of this important? It comes up for two reasons. One, sometimes people aren't sure about writing a complete sentence. So they're using commas sort of freely and not necessarily correctly. Okay. Sometimes people are using commas where we really should be using periods. So I'm trying to show you where we can use commas and where we don't necessarily have to use commas. So one thing I want to point out, if the dependent conjunction is second, we don't necessarily need a comma there. Okay. This still is legitimate without the comma. Now, these ones, it's more common and considered grammatically correct to have the comma after the subordinate clause or the dependent clause when it comes first. I have seen a move towards people not doing this, but at the moment it's still considered correct, so we're going to go with that. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, so there's really basically three types of dependent clauses, okay? In other words, a clause that cannot stand alone as a sentence. An adverbial clause, an adjective clause, and a noun clause, okay? An adverbial clause is acting as an adverb, and it's working to describe a verb or an adjective or an adverb, right? The common one is the verb. Adjective clause is acting as an adjective, and it's describing a noun or a pronoun. A noun clause is acting as a noun in a sentence. Okay. Adverb dependent clauses can come at the beginning or at the end of a sentence. If I wanted to get wet, I would have taken a shower. Okay, so if I wanted to get wet, hang on a second, I will go to the show myself unless you want to come too. I am going to tell mom that you hit me as soon as she comes home. Now that it is October, it should snow soon. The snow should be pretty deep by the time it is Christmas. So generally, if the dependent clause comes first, what we talked about, we put a comma after it. If it comes at the end of a sentence, then no comma is needed. An adjective clause can be essential or it can be considered non-essential. When it's essential, it's a crucial element in describing someone or someone, and it doesn't need any commas. And the idea is that if you left that clause off, the sentence wouldn't make sense. You wouldn't know where to find whatever you're looking for. So, for example, the building that has the red neon sign is where I will meet up with you. Now, if I took out the clause here that has the red neon sign, if I just cut that right out, the building is where I will meet up with you. Well, what building? Where do you want me to meet? I don't get it. So you need to have that information there. The guy who wrecked your car wants to talk to you. If I just said the guy wants to talk to you, what guy? What do you mean? It's got to be the guy who wrecked your car. And because it's essential, it's a crucial element in identifying that person. There are no commas needed. An adjectival dependent clause is non-essential when the information it gives is not a critical element in describing someone or something. It's just additional information. And in this case, we generally use commas to set it off and show that. Mr. Smith, who used to go to school with my dad, is going to be my math teacher this year. Now, if I took this part out, Mr. Smith is going to be my math teacher this year. That's fine. It doesn't change anything. It still makes sense, right? It's non-essential. I don't need it to understand who Mr. Smith is. Therefore, it's okay to take it out if I wanted to, and it's okay to leave it in as long as I set it off with the commas, okay? I'll just put it back in there so I don't forget it. I have always lived in Windsor, also known as the Auto Town. So this whole little section is describing, sorry, hang on. It's describing Windsor, it's acting as an adjective, but it's not essential. You could still find out where Windsor is if you didn't know it was the Auto Town. It's extra information. So we set it off with a comma. Adjective clauses start with a relative pronoun. The reason they're sometimes called relative clauses is that they usually begin with relative pronouns, which I'm not sure if we've really talked about a whole lot. Those are basically the kind of what we think of as the question words. Which, who, whom, whose, where, when, that. Sometimes you'll see these are kind of more obscure, but whoever, whomever, wherever, whichever. Sometimes why will get used. So those are how they start, okay? They need a subject and a verb. We've already talked about that. A clause by definition has to have a subject and a verb. Sometimes it isn't super obvious what it is, but it has to be there, okay? Sometimes the subject is the relative pronoun, right? So a pronoun will work as well as a subject. Standing as a subject. Adjective clauses are connected to independent clauses. And again, that's what we were talking about. It's a dependent clause. It must be connected to an independent clause. It cannot stand on its own. So for example, I can't just say where they have Wi-Fi. I have to connect it to an independent clause. So I can say something like, let's go to a cafe where they have Wi-Fi. Number 4, adjective clauses relate to nouns from the independent clause. Adjective clauses modify nouns, right? Which means they must be related to another noun or a pronoun outside its own clause. So it's referring to a separate noun. That noun can be doing different jobs in the sentence. It can be the subject, it can be the direct object, prepositional object, any other role that a noun can play. So can, it's still there. It can be described by an independent clause, by a dependent clause, sorry. She didn't wake from the nap until 6 p.m. So 6 p.m. is the noun that we're describing when the sun was setting. Now that's a funky one because 6 p.m. it's got a number. We don't usually think of numbers as being a noun. But if I had written like 6 o'clock, that would be a totally acceptable noun. So even though it's in number format, it actually still counts as the noun we're we're describing in this case. Okay. Adjective clauses come after the noun. Normally, when we have adjectives, we put them in front of the word we're describing. But in this case, clauses generally always come after it. This makes it pretty easy to identify which noun they modify. So, for example, the rich lady whose house we were at wasn't even home. And you can kind of picture like somebody's trying to explain a little bit more about the noun they just mentioned. So, what this means, though, is you cannot start a sentence with an adjective clause because there has to be a noun or a pronoun first. But you can start a sentence with a noun clause. And noun clauses can sometimes start with a relative pronoun. So sometimes they get a little mixed up. Now, why does this even matter? Because the adjective clause is going to get set off with the commas and the noun clause wouldn't. Okay. This is a little bit fussy. I mentioned it just because I'm noticing these kind of comma issues. I don't think it's a huge thing, and it's certainly not the kind of thing that you would lose a bunch of marks for, but it's just kind of one of those finicky things about English that makes a little tiny bit of difference when you're writing. So the same phrase, whoever eats the most hot dog, can actually be working as two different types of clauses depending on what it's doing in the sentence. Whoever eats the most hot dogs gets the trophy. At this point, whoever eats the most hot dogs is the noun. And you could tell because I could place it by he or she gets the trophy. It totally works. The winner, whoever eats the most hot dogs, gets the trophy. Now, in this case, if I said the winner, he or she gets the trophy, it's not really necessary, right? I'm explaining how you become the winner, right? You become the winner by eating the most hot dogs. Okay. And so because of that, it's being set off with commas. It's a non-essential adjective phrase. Okay. Finding our dependent clauses in complex sentences. We've been talking a lot about them. Big thing to keep in mind is they start with subordinating conjunctions, such as so, because, since, before, even though, after, although, wherever, while. Okay, so we're going to read each sentence and underline the dependent clause at this point. In the morning, I went for a jog. Oh, wait. No, you know what? We've done this one already, just in a different format. We're good. Okay, Unit 4 is the last unit in this course. The big focus in this unit is on reading strategies and your literacy growth through the course. So by the end of this unit, here are the things you're going to be able to do. You're going to be able to write a summary on an author's biography, assemble a literacy portfolio that demonstrates your growth, complete your ongoing literacy and reflection journal. We've been doing those bit by bit. Write a multi-paragraph opinion essay on your growth in reading and writing. Complete your term-long reading log. Demonstrate your understanding of a novel through close examination of the characters. Identify reading strategies and skills. Apply your reading strategies and skills to read a new text. Research topics such as careers and scholarships. Create an informational paragraph. So those are some of our tasks and our goals over the next couple of weeks. We're pretty close to the end of this term. Here are some of the reading skills and strategies we've practiced. And I want you to think about this as we're going forward. The first couple of assignments are kind of reviewing our reading skills and using them to understand the next few chapters. So we have practiced scanning for information, skimming nonfiction material to get an overview of it, locating specific information, making connections and making predictions, summarizing different types of texts, retelling narrative texts, stating an opinion on a text and supporting it with supporting evidence, identifying story elements such as characters and setting, asking questions before, during, and after reading, and prioritizing information. So here is how you'll see it in your package. You've got the little cloud. They list some of our skills that we've practiced. This entire lesson, all the assignments, is worth about 26 marks total. We're good there. All right, so this is assignment 40, and we start off with the characters. So before you read any further in the book, if by chance, I just want to point out, you've read ahead in the book a bit, don't worry. I talked to a student today, and they were stressed out because they realized they'd read the whole novel. Don't worry about it. Simply write down what you know about those characters. Try not to include any major events from the last 3 chapters. It's not the end of the world. Do not worry. You're not going to get marked down for that in any way, okay? So before we go on, though, think about what you know about these characters. It can be like what their character traits are, like are they helpful, are they kind, are they mean? It can be like really important information, like how do they relate to the main character? What's something really important that they've done in the book? Those kind of things. So because you're looking at 6 marks, we're looking at 6 people, try to think of, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that you could say about each one of these people. And if you don't quite remember who they are, which happens sometimes if they're not a major character, go back and just kind of flip through the first couple of chapters and it'll jog your memory and be like, oh, okay, that's the person who's, the uncle or the teacher or the gookum, or sometimes we forget as we're going along what people's names are. That's fine. It's not the end of the world at all. And again, you're also welcome to flip through to get some ideas for what to say about people. That's also just fine. So beside each character's name, write point form notes to show predictions about what you think is going to happen to, or predictions about each character that's listed. Remember that your predictions are going to be made based on what you know about the characters so far. Again, you're supposed to be making reasonable predictions about what will happen in the last 3 chapters to each characters. I am not marking whether your predictions actually happen. You don't need to look ahead and say, ooh, can I get this right? It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. I'm really marking whether they're reasonable based on the other events in the book and the character traits so far. So, for example, it would not be reasonable to suddenly have aliens land and steal Martha away. It wouldn't really match the genre of the story or the tone of the rest of the book. There's been nothing throughout the entire book about aliens. It would just be strange. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, that your predictions make sense, not that they're correct. Okay, sometimes students get kind of anxious about that, but correct is not what I'm looking for. After you've made all your predictions, oh, hang on, I'm going to flip over something else first. Hang on, I think I kind of added a few things. Yeah, okay, before I gone. Yep. Okay, thinking about your own life and the real world in general. When you're thinking about these people, think about how the kind of situations that people are in often end in real life, and think about, do you think it'll be the same here? So, for example, in real life, kids might run away thinking they're going to live on their own like an adult, kind of magically. They're not usually thinking about money, jobs, apartments. They're just mad and they run off. In real life, that usually ends really badly. Either somebody takes advantage of them or they end up going home. So knowing how that situation ends in real life can give you ideas on a reasonable prediction for a character in a novel who's in a similar situation. So that isn't the situation in this novel, but I'm giving you kind of an example. You can also make predictions thinking about the character's feelings. How have you or people you've known acted when they were angry or sad or excited or depressed? And often we kind of make personal predictions about a friend's possible actions, like, oh, they're upset, they're going to break off with their boyfriend, or, oh, they're kind of sad, I better keep an eye on them and make sure they're okay. Or so the same kind of knowledge about emotions that you use to make predictions about your friend's actions can also be used to make predictions about the character's actions. You can also think about, what has the character done so far? Do you think they are likely to continue acting this way? If you think they're going to change, you need to give a reason why you think that they're going to change. Okay. Think about the genre or the format. Certain genres have events that are acceptable or even expected, and events that would be considered off limits. We haven't talked about a lot of narrative genres here, so here's a quick summary. I just realized we didn't finish this because somebody phoned me and I was talking to them right before things. Okay, so things like mystery, right? So mysteries, there's almost certainly going to be someone dead within the first chapter, sometimes within the first couple pages, right? Science fiction, right away, there's gonna be robots, there's gonna be space things, there's gonna be things that are different, and it's gonna be very obviously science fiction. If it's fantasy, you're gonna have things like knights and kings and queens. There'll be things like swords or dragons. You very quickly, each genre has their own sort of typical settings, typical elements. So it would be weird for me to suggest that in a fantasy with kind of a Game of Thrones type fantasy where there's dragons and kings and queens, that suddenly robots come in and take over. That'd be strange because high fantasy doesn't normally have robots, right? So you have to keep that in mind too. Jimmy Comes Home is in the realistic genre, right? It's a book that's based on realism. So you have to keep that in mind as you're going through making predictions, okay? After you've done all your prediction making, then you need to read the last 3 chapters of the novel before we can do the next questions, okay? Some of these questions involve checking on your predictions, so you do need to make sure you finish the book before you keep on going to answer them accurately. And I'm sorry I'm putting them together. It's just kind of how they've phrased the assignment. So if you haven't, go ahead, take a little bit, read the next 3 chapters. It include in the package, it says you'll be reading the final 3 chapters of your novel and answering the questions that follow. Try to use the reading skills that you've developed during this course, including accessing prior knowledge, skimming, scanning, reading the questions first so they guide your reading. Okay. So these next questions. Number 3, list the important events that Peter tells Ms. Quintal about Jimmy's past in point form. So 2 marks for that. Number 4, why does Peter think it is a good idea for Jimmy to participate in the healing circle? What does Jimmy think about it? Number 5, was your prediction for Gary accurate? Explain what you thought would happen and then what actually did happen in the novel. Include your reaction to what happens in the novel in your answer. Were you surprised, upset, or did you knew it, that was what you thought was going to happen? We also have on page 77 of the novel, Ms. Quintal shares something about her own personal life with Jimmy. What does she reveal? And why do you think she offers this private information to a student? Now, they've given you the page number. So if you don't remember what she shared with Jimmy, it's fine to go back to page 77, look and read it and see what you think, okay? That's why they've given you the page number. So don't feel, it's not like you're not cheating to do that. That's totally acceptable, okay? Number 7, complex relationships run throughout the novel. Choose one relationship in Jimmy Comes Home and comment on how or why it is complex. Make sure you name the people in the relationship. For example, Jimmy and Ms. Quintal or Jimmy and Teresa. Decide whether it's a good relationship or a bad one, and use examples from the text to back up your opinion. Okay, that's 3. So I wanted to tackle a few things here because there's a lot of words to unpack here that kind of mean specific things, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page as to what that means. So hang on a second, and we'll talk about this. First of all, what does the word complex specifically kind of mean? It actually has multiple meanings. This is the meaning that we're kind of talking about in this instance. Having many parts related to each other in ways that may be difficult to understand. So, a complex surgical procedure. The question of who is legally responsible is a complex issue. All right, so how does that relate to a relationship? How can a relationship be complex? A relationship might be considered simple if the feelings are very straightforward and the relationship is easy to understand. So clearly enemies. So for example, if you think about the Avengers, remember the bad guys that come from space and they're attacking New York? It's a very simple relationship between the Avengers and those bad guys. It's just we're enemies. We're going to try and kill each other. That's all there is. That's simple. Best friends. I'm trying to think of a movie that has best friends. Um, Best friends where there's not been any arguments, there's no jealousy, there's no confusion. They're just pure, simple best friends. Okay. True love, right? Again, pure, simple. No one's betrayed anybody. No one's let anybody down. It's just a simple, straightforward kind of relationship. Now, I know you're probably thinking, in real life, that's really not how often things are, which is true. A relationship might be considered complex when the people have mixed feelings for each other or where a lot of different kinds of events have gone on. So, for example, maybe they're good friends, but there's been a big fight or misunderstanding, like good friends, but maybe one person borrowed a bunch of money and hasn't paid it back and it's really hurting the other person, or good friends, but one person is now hooked up with the previous person's boyfriend. So they care about each other, they love each other, but there's also some places where they've kind of hurt each other and let each other down. Somewhat on enemies, except you kind of understand why you guys don't like each other. So think of like Thor and Loki, right? In that movie, where they're brothers, right? So on the one hand, brothers usually kind of get along, but they're brothers that are very different. There's been a lot of jealousy between them. And there's lots of times where Loki goes out of his way to try and cause trouble, cause difficulty for Thor. On the other hand, when they were both being fought by a greater enemy, Thanos, they kind of banded together and deliberately worked to try and kill him. They weren't successful, but that overall friendship began to kick in. That's a complex relationship, right? If you were trying to describe that to someone, it would take a little while. So a relationship that's hard to describe. It has a lot of history. There's been a lot of different things that have gone on, both good and bad. If it was pure good or pure bad, there would be that level of complexity. So, which relationships in the novel would you consider complex? Because not all of them are complex. For example, some of the people in the novel don't have any relationship at all, right? And others have a very simple relationship that's not very complicated at all either. The other phrase that came up that I thought maybe warranted a little bit of discussion was they talked about deciding whether a relationship is good or whether it's bad. And I thought, I don't know, are we all on the same page of what that means? So generally, I would consider a relationship good if it helps both the people involved. For example, does it make them healthier? Does it make them happier? Does it help them make better choices? Does it make them better people, kinder, more stable? Generally, a relationship is considered bad if it hurts the people involved. Does it make them unhappier or angrier? Does it cause them to make worse choices? Right? Does it make them worse people, meaner, less reliable, going out for vengeance? A lot of us know times where there's a couple involved where they actually do better apart than they do together. When they're together, they just seem to really make poor decisions. They seem to hurt each other. They just seem to not do so good. So that's the kind of relationship we're thinking about when we're talking about it's bad for the people involved, right? It just keeps on hurting them. So the relationship that you think is complex, do you consider it a good relationship? Is it overall beneficial, or is it overall bad? And what are the reasons you think so? Now, sometimes it's tricky because sometimes there's a relationship where it's sort of good for the one person, but it's maybe not so good for the other person. And I'm thinking of situations where somebody's having to rescue somebody all the time, right? Someone's getting in trouble and the other person comes to their rescue and fixes things. Now, maybe in the long run, that is not great for the person that's getting rescued, but it's not always obvious, right? At the time, it can seem like things are great. Hey, there's this person who loves me and they help me and they're making my life better. But meanwhile, the other person is maybe getting tired, getting worn out, getting upset, spending money they don't have. So, anyways, it's a complicated decision. You'll have to decide, is the relationship good or bad? Okay, so at this point, you have just finished reading book 1 of the Green Star Lake series. There are more books in the series if you decide you want to read some. What did you think of this book? Rate how you liked the book from 1, did not like it at all, to 10, loved it. Give at least 3 reasons for your rating. If you felt kind of meh, like it's just, I don't know, it was okay. Okay is kind of like in the middle. Okay is kind of like 5. Like I didn't hate it, but I didn't really love it. That's fine. So give reasons for your rating. I find this is a hard thing for people to do sometimes if they aren't really used to talking about books. They're like, I don't know, I just liked it, or I don't know, I just hated it. What do you want me to say? So I'm going to try and talk about what are some of the things that you can say when you're talking about a book. Generally, you kind of pick part of the book that you want to comment on or that you want to talk about. So some things that you might have loved or maybe hated about the book, the characters. What did you think about them? Was there a character you really thought was great, was wonderful? Were there characters that you thought were like unrealistic or unnecessarily mean, or you just thought, it's just badly written? Somebody who was like that, they would never say that, right? What did you think about the plot of the story? Was it boring? Was it exciting? Did enough things happen? Was the ending interesting? Did it go the way you were hoping it would go? What did you think of the events of the story? So yeah, plot is kind of like the events, right? Sometimes you see movies or books, you're like, whew, this is going so slow, nothing's happening, right? And the genre, this is where it ended up going. Realistic, fantasy, science fiction, romance, mystery, horror. Some people just don't like certain types of books, right? For example, I know some people can't stand historical fiction. They just don't see any point in reading a book about the past. Bores them. So automatically, if they read a book on that, they wouldn't like it. So that's perfectly valid, right? I don't like horror. I have a really vivid imagination. I do not need to read horror to get bad things going on in my mind. I got plenty of great, horrible imaginations on my own, right? So automatically, that's going to be a knock against that particular book for me. The overall message or theme of the book. This is a big one. It can be kind of hard to put into words sometimes, but sometimes you read a book, and it's like, the message was just, give up, life is pointless. Well, I don't want to read a book like that. I don't believe that. And I feel like I've wasted my time if that was your message, right? If the whole point of the book is give up, well, why did I even bother reading your book? Why did you even bother writing your book? So there's all sorts of messages, right? Friendship is amazing. True love always wins. The good always wins. there's all sorts of different kinds of messages or themes in a book, right? What did you think the overall message or theme was? And did you like it? Was it uplifting or enjoyable to you? The dialogue. This is one of those funny things. Some writers are amazing at dialogue, and it's like you can practically hear the people talking, like there's a little movie going on in your head. Some writers are not so good with dialogue, and it just doesn't seem realistic what they have people saying. That's a valid criticism. Sometimes we like a book because there's similarities between you and the characters, or between you or the events. I was just thinking sometimes we have books that are about escapism, books where it's completely different from you. So, for example, maybe you've lived in one town your whole life. So you love to read books about travel because that's just not what your life is like. That's what you enjoy, right? So sometimes we want to read books that are very different from us. And that's fine too. The ending, that's always huge. Sometimes you can read a whole book, love it, and you get to the ending, and the ending's like, oh, that's a terrible ending. Either it's poorly written or it's completely different than what it seemed like was going to happen. Things like that. So those are all things that you can comment on when you're talking about why you liked a book or why you didn't like a book. All right. How are we doing? Okay. Um, Supporting your opinion with evidence or details in the book. This goes to what we were talking about. You can't just say, I liked it, I hated it, just because. But some words that can help you to explain your reasons are things like because, due to, since. I liked the part where, I liked when, I felt a connection to, I understand. Oh, I underwood. I don't know what happened there. I understood how the character feels because, right? The theme was important to me because, right? So explaining your thoughts. So I I'm giving an example using Harry Potter just because I feel like most of us have probably either read the book or seen the movie. Um, I loved the character of Harry Potter because even though he was very powerful, he was still very kind. I enjoyed the world of magic, the owls as letter carriers, wands made from various items, unicorns in the forest, mermaids under the sea, and terrifying dragons. I also liked the theme of friendship between Harry, Hermione, and Ron Weasley. They always used their talents to help each other when they faced danger. So here's some of my details. Even though he was powerful, even though he was powerful, he was still kind. Okay. I enjoyed the world of magic. Okay. And then I gave some examples of what those are. That's talking about kind of the fantasy genre. And I'm saying I enjoy that fantasy genre. Here are some of the elements in the book that are part of the fantasy genre that I really liked. And here I'm talking about the theme of friendship. And then I explain what they did. Sorry, probably bad highlighting there. But anyways, you want to make sure that your opinions show that you read the book. If I could take your opinion and just attach it to any movie, then it wouldn't be a very well stated opinion. It might still be true, right? That's fine, but it won't necessarily be um, useful in terms of how we're talking about it right now. Let me just kind of grab an example here. So let's say I said it was scary. Um, I liked the guy Jimmy. Um, the book ended ending was cool. Okay, so I have stated my opinion. Okay, I've given my opinion for sure. But what I haven't done is I need to support it with evidence from the book. And that is a hard part, right? You may have to kind of take a few minutes and go through the book and find things. So here's an example. It was scary. I'm not going to be talking about our book. I'm going to talk about a different book. I'm just going to think of, I was watching Supernatural last night. I'm going to talk about that. It was scary because when they were trying to kill the monster who was attacking the child, it didn't work. Okay, I've just been very specific explaining why I thought it was so scary. Okay. I liked the character Thor because he is very kind to people, even when he is going through hard times himself, right? The book ending was cool. I'm not going to talk about Jamie. I'm going to talk about a different book. Let me think here. What have I read recently? I'm going to just make something up because the detective not only caught the killer, but he reunited with his long lost love. Okay, so these are the kinds of statements I am looking for, okay? Not just your opinion, but your opinion with evidence, all right? This is the marking sheet for assignment 40. Assignment 40 is long and it's got a lot of different parts you can see, okay? So here we're looking at using directly stated ideas and information. Some of our questions, you can just go in the book and it's just stated there. Using indirectly stated information. Sometimes you're going to have to read between the lines. For example, when we're talking about the complexity of the relationship or whether it's a good or bad relationship, it's not going to just say that. We're going to have to kind of put two and two together. Making connections between personal knowledge and experiences and the text, giving our opinion, but supporting it with the text. Using reading strategies, notes and or markings in the text. You do not need to go through the text and make markings. Using reading strategies is all those kind of things that we were doing, making connections, making predictions, close reading, skimming for information. If you're answering these questions well, I guarantee you are using these reading strategies, okay? Just a quick overall of the categories. Approaching means you didn't quite make it. It means that we failed to meet the criteria. Achieving is 50 to 64%. That means you've passed. Exceeding the required level, at that point, you're getting between about a C or a high B. That means I think you're doing a really good job. You're basically getting it. Sure, maybe there's a few errors here or there, but overall, you've got the idea. And then significantly exceeding is where you're going above and beyond. Okay. Your stuff shows it's very well written, it's very well thought out. It shows an excellent ability to make connections. Okay. So that's our assignment sheet. I just wanted to give you some encouragement. It's Thursday. We're almost there. Got one more day left in our week. And I love this little kitty here trying to do the Rubik's Cube. It says, wait, I'm almost done this. This is the last unit of the course. If you've gotten this far, please do not give up. I know there's a lot of work, but you're almost finished. And I know for so many of you out here, this is the last course before you need to finish high school. Okay. So don't give up. You can do this. I guarantee you, if you've been handing assignments in all along, you are so close to being done. So good luck. Keep on going. I will be in the office tomorrow. If anybody's having trouble, I'd be happy to talk to people tomorrow about assignments and give you any kind of help you need. Okay. Good luck with everything. And I will talk to you guys on Monday. Take care.